Join us every Wednesday for InFocus, a weekly talk show produced by the St. Kitts Nevis Information Service, where we provide exclusives with key persons within the government and discuss pertinent, relevant, and interesting matters that affect us all. Tune in every Wednesday, live on ZIZ Radio and streamed live on Facebook at SKNIS Media and ZIZ Online. InFocus, your government, your business.
I'm Ian Richards. Welcome to InFocus, a weekly program where we zoom in on what's happening within and throughout the government, your government. A key pillar in the transition of St. Kitts and Nevis into a sustainable island state is the orange economy. Now, the orange economy is defined by the United Nations as an evolving concept based on the contribution and the potential of creative assets to contribute to economic growth and development. The use of creative assets results in the creation of intellectual property in quite a number of areas. Here today to discuss wide-ranging issues related to intellectual property, associated protections, and pathways to benefit from such is Jihan Williams-Knight, Registrar of the Intellectual Property Office of St. Kitts and Nevis. Stay with us as we delve into your government, your business. Thanks for staying with us, and allow me now to welcome for the first time to InFocus Ms. Jihan Williams-Knight, or Mrs. Jihan Williams-Knight, Registrar within the Intellectual Property Office of St. Kitts and Nevis. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Ian. And I just realized, yes, it is my first time on InFocus.
Right.
So thank you for allowing us to be here as well.
Right. And so intellectual property, it's a term that persons hear about, but they're not quite sure what exactly it means. Tell us, what is intellectual property?
So the easy definition is creations of the mind. So we understand property in the context of land, a car, your phone, your tablet, whatever it is, those physical pieces of property, we understand those are considered property. But what happens to things that you create with your intellect and your talent and your creativity? The products of those those elements are called intellectual property. So, which is why we say intellectual property, simply speaking, refers to creations of the mind.
So you're talking about development of
songs, poems, ideas manifested into products, inventions. It's a host of different things that can fall under intellectual property.
Okay, and you are the registrar now of the Intellectual Property Office of St. Kitts and Nevis, as we established earlier. So what is your role?
So the registrar is essentially the head of the Intellectual Property Office. So my responsibility is to be the chief administrator of the office, and of course to be responsible for policy relating to intellectual property. So the creation of policy, ensuring that our laws are up to date, to see if there are new areas that we need to be looking into for intellectual property. And a large part of our work also relates to the registration of intellectual property rights. So you can apply for a trademark or a patent in St. Kitts and Nevis. So that's what we do as well. And of course we work with partner ministries and you know, agencies who are connected to intellectual property protection or intellectual property creation to ensure that we understand in St. Kitts and Nevis that innovation and creation are essential tools to development. So we're trying to push innovation and creativity to fuel national prosperity. That is actually the theme of the slogan for the office.
Right, okay. And so, of course, You would have mentioned in terms of the policies that is being formed and partner agencies. I imagine that would include international and regional organizations as well.
Yes, quite a bit. We work very closely with the World Intellectual Property Organization. We are actually a member state because it is an agency of the United Nations. So St. Kitts and Nevis is a member state of WIPO, which we refer to it loosely. And we also partner with other regional and international bodies, CARICOM, OECS, of course. We recently had a project with the European Union Intellectual Property Office, so we definitely partner a lot with these regional and international bodies to ensure that our policies are, on par with what is happening internationally as well.
It's live TV, but I don't think we got an opportunity to establish, what should I call you, Mrs. Knight, Mrs. Williams Knight?
Anyone works for me. Okay. Anyone works for me.
All right, so we earlier established some of the types of intellectual property in terms of the creations, that is, you said that anything that comes from the mind. Can you give us a sense of what types of expression are not commonly considered or viewed by others as intellectual property, but it really is?
So I actually had a very interesting question relating to this yesterday, where someone was concerned about voice notes that you send on WhatsApp. So if you send a voice note on WhatsApp, you've created a sound recording, and actually under copyright, sound recordings are protected. So if I send you a voice note and I meant it for you, and you decide to put it out on Facebook, you've actually infringed my copyright, because you've taken my sound recording and made it available to the public, which I never intended to. Because as the creator of the copyright material, I am the one who has the right to put it out to the public. So things as simple as voice notes, text messages, these are very simple things that we don't even think of, but they have been the subject of cases all over the world for decades. So it's important for people to recognize that they're intellectual property owners. We're property owners, and we don't even recognize that.
So in a case of some inspirational quote that you see on social media or WhatsApps at times, persons will share that, where does that fall? Does that also include?
Well, a quote somebody had to come up with the quote, so it would belong to whoever created the quote. But then separate from that, if somebody has put that quote into artwork, then that artwork is a separate piece of copyright material. So then it would depend on, what the owners intended. A lot of these things are very hard to enforce or monitor, because on the internet anybody has access to it. It could be shared easily, but for the most part, people generally if they're trying to monetize what they have created, they will pay very close attention to it. So if somebody shares it without authorization, they would probably follow up on it if they become aware.
So how can intellectual property be protected?
So let's start at the top. We have to set, well, I should say the bottom, the foundation. So there are two main forms of intellectual property, or two main branches. So on one branch we have copyright and the related rights, and then on the next branch you have what we consider industrial property. Now under industrial property you have things like trademarks, patents, trade secrets, protection for plant varieties, geographical indications. There's a whole host of material that falls under industrial property. Now each type of intellectual property, however, has its own protection system, but what they all have in common is that the creator is the owner, and the owner has a particular set of rights that only the owner can do or authorize other people to do. And so if it happens where somebody has used someone's intellectual property without their permission, then the specific legal regime relating to the particular set of the particular type of intellectual property would come into play. but it varies depending on the type of intellectual property.
So essentially, there are different types of protections that you mentioned,
Yes.
patents. Just run through those a bit in terms of the differences between trademarks, patents, trade secrets. Give us a sense of it. And I know it's quite a lot, but
It
I
can
think
be,
it's
but
important
I'll
for
do my
persons
best.
to know, right?
I'll do my best. So, copyright. This protects original literary, artistic, dramatic, musical works, sound recordings, broadcast organizations and their products. So original, this is the artistic area now. So this is where the songs and the poetry and this recording that we're doing, this would actually be subject to copyright protection. Cable programming is also protected. So that's copyright. Trademarks deals with the protection of elements of a business or an organization that gives it its distinctive quality. So if I put 2 bottles of water in front of you, you know which one is Nelson Spring water based on visual elements that help to distinguish Nelson Spring water from Island Purified. So it could be things like bottles, it could be things like their logos, it could be things, even we've had discussions about the bread tags, where I don't know if you've ever noticed our bakeries use different color tags, so you know which one is freight because the freight tag is yellow. So those elements of an organization or entity that helps to distinguish their goods and services from another person's goods and services, those are trademarks. So those distinctive elements are trademarks. And then trade secrets, these are information. This is information that gives a company a competitive edge, but it is a secret. So fabulous example, the KFC recipe,
right.
Where if people knew what that recipe is, then KFC would lose their competitive edge. So different things like that. Those are just 3 examples of different types of intellectual property.
So in order to get your property, your intellectual property registered, you go to an organization. Here in St. Kitts and Nevis, I imagine it would be IPO, SKNIS.
Yes. It depends, but again, trade secrets, because it is a secret, you can't register it. Because if you register it, you'll have to tell me what the secret is, and then it no longer becomes a secret. So with trade secrets, the way that you protect it would be simply by keeping your mouth shut and ensuring that the people who deal with it are under contractual obligations to not disclose. So that's why I said, the different types, they have different types of protection. Copyright is not it's not a requirement for copyright material to be registered. It is an automatic right. So you don't have to register anything for copyright, but trademarks, patents, and other forms of intellectual property, you have to apply to the Intellectual Property Office, and then we go through the application and issue, certificates of protection.
So while the protection is there, and let's use for practical examples, because of course yesterday there was the music festival launch, at least that was part of a press conference that was held by the Ministry of Tourism, and so we're going to stick with the artistic expression form, songs, poetry, etc. How can one benefit now from the protections that are out there? How can I benefit from ensuring that my intellectual property remains my property?
Well, the benefit of protection is that this is the basis. Copyright protection is the basis on which people get royalties. So you can get payment if an artist performs on a show. They get paid for performing on the show. That is their performance fee. Thank you for coming on the stage, dancing in your nice pretty clothes. But that is one form of payment. But most artists try to get payments through royalties, and you will only be able to get royalties if you are the established owner of the copyright, the song or whatever it is you're trying to create. Now, if you don't enforce it, or if you let anybody use it, then they would be benefiting from your work, and then you would therefore be losing the opportunity to benefit from the song you created or whatever creative enterprise that you're in. So it's important for people to understand that, you know, you might benefit, but unless you really enforce your rights, other people will take the benefits that are really entitled to you.
And when you say royalties, of course, that relates to financial rewards.
Yes. So like a royalty would be a payment that you receive from other people using your work. So for example, if, you know, an artist performs on a show, essentially what should happen is that the organizer of the show should be paying what you call licensing fees, and then from those licensing fees the artist gets a chunk of it, because my work has enhanced your product, your show, or your event. So those sorts of benefits, that licensing fee that was paid, you should be entitled to some of that money as well. So even if you're not on the show, even if your song was just played at the show, then you're home in your bed and you're getting payments due to you. So this is how, you know, think about TV shows. Somebody may have sung the theme song for a TV show and they might be long dead and gone, but because their work is still being used and they are the established owner, every time somebody uses their work, they're entitled to royalties. And the basis of that is copyright.
Yeah, I was going to use Friends as an example, but I'm not sure it's a young person who's really familiar with Friends, or much less consider that entertainment right now. Right. Okay, so let's talk about infringements then, because we spoke about the copyright. So if my rights are infringed, what happens?
Well, if your rights are infringed, the onus is on you to take action. Nobody else has the right to take action for you. So if something happens, you wrote a song and let's say you saw it being used as a theme song for a TV show and nobody asked your permission to use it, then you would have to institute legal proceedings against the person who has used your song and ask them for, you know, your slice of what you're due. So it is your responsibility as a creator or as the owner of a song to enforce your rights. Nobody else can enforce that for you.
Is it difficult to pursue a case of protection?
You know, funnily enough, we've never had a full copyright infringement case in St. Kitts and Nevis. We've had claims that have later been settled outside of court, but the option is still there, the opportunity is still there. So I don't know if it would be had or not, but I could tell you that people are doing it all the time in other jurisdictions.
How does someone get copyright protection?
Creation, it's an automatic right. So if I stayed here and I wrote you a poem and I've simply written you something that is original and it exists on paper or on my tablet, some other way that I could prove that it exists, then I've created something and I have the copyright for it. So it's by virtue of creation you get copyright protection. So, but what is important is being able to prove that I am the owner, I am the creator of the poem. That's right. So it's not that you have to do anything to get copyright protection, but in the event of a dispute, then it would be important for you to establish pieces of evidence to show that I was the one who created this particular work. So how that would work in real terms. So I write the poem, I give it to you, and later on I see it in a magazine. Nobody asked me to publish it in the magazine. So I go to the magazine and I tell the magazine person, I am the creator of this work, and you needed to have my authority in order to publish it in your work. Well, they will say, well, what evidence do you have to prove? And I will say, I could pull up my email, or I could ask the cameraman to do an affidavit stating he saw me writing and he saw me do the poem for you. So I would be establishing these pieces of evidence to prove in the event that there is a dispute that I am the one who created the work.
If you write something for someone, do you transfer the rights? For instance,
no, that's a big misconception. If you ask me to write a love letter for your girlfriend, I'm still the owner of the copyright. I just did that for you, unless you and I have an agreement that I will be transferring all rights to you, and that transfer actually has to be in writing.
How long does copyright protection last?
So right now it lasts 50 years from the end of the year that you die. Well, I should say 50 years. Let me start over. I just sound confusing. It lasts for your life, as long as you're alive, and then when you die, it lasts 50 years after that. Okay. So, and we're actually changing the law to extend that to 70 years.
As in St. Kitts or Nevis or
St. Kitts and Nevis,
okay.
Where we would be extending our protection.
So is it different in say in the United States? Do they have a longer period?
The United States is 70. To my knowledge, Jamaica and Mexico perhaps have the top two longest periods. I think one is 95 years and one is 90 years. Somewhere around there, if I'm not mistaken, but I know Mexico and Jamaica they have very higher than most people.
And
but the baseline is 50. It must be 50, but states they can increase it if they like.
Right. Okay. And copyright protection is not just enforced within, say, St. Kitts and Nevis. It exists wherever.
So this is also a big piece of information that people need to be aware of. When it comes to trademarks, patents, and other types of intellectual property, when you're registered in St. Kitts and Nevis, you're only protected in St. Kitts and Nevis. So if you did a cookie and you gave it a logo and a name, if you came to our office and protected the logo in St. Kitts and Nevis, it only protects you in St. Kitts and Nevis. So if you market it online or you export it somewhere else, it would not be protected in another country. That's with trademarks and patents. However, with copyright, we are member to what is called the Berne Convention, and we have agreed that we would extend protection to other countries who are a part of the Berne Convention, and in return, those countries would also protect works created in St. Kitts and Nevis. So there are, I think at last count that I saw, 181 countries that are members to the Berne Convention. So for example, if the poem that I wrote showed up in an Australian magazine, I would be able to institute proceedings in Australia based on copyright protection. But if it was my cookie in Australia, I wouldn't be able to protect it.
Interesting. It's very interesting. Okay, so we want to talk a bit more now about the office that you lead, which is the Intellectual Property Office of St. Kitts and Nevis. But before we delve a bit into that, we want to take a quick break.
Sure.
Stay with us. We'll be right back with more In Focus. Welcome back to In Focus. We continue our discussion with the Registrar of the Intellectual Property Office in St. Kitts and Nevis. That would be Mrs. Jihan Williams-Knight, and we're speaking about copyright protection, intellectual property, patents, trademarks, all the good stuff that comes along with protecting your creations, your inventions. Ms. Knight, we spoke about now the office itself. You explained what your role is as the registrar, but talk to us about the office that you lead.
So we are a department under the Ministry of Justice and Legal Affairs. So we are a government department. And I mentioned earlier what our role is in relation to policy development, registration of intellectual property, and sometimes also advising on intellectual property matters that government has to deal with. We do a lot of public awareness initiatives. We try to raise awareness for people in St. Kitts and Nevis, because we recognize, of course, that for some people this is still a new area and something that they're not completely comfortable with, because it can be very intricate, and any little detail could probably throw it off, or throw off a piece of advice. So we try to raise awareness and help people wade through that sort of information as much as possible. But our goal really is to help people in St. Kitts and Nevis see that their minds and their intellect and their talent and their creativity and the innovative ways that we do things, these are vehicles on which we can base our economic growth. These are things that we could use to empower ourselves, empower our communities, and it's ways that we could build well-being, mental health. It's such an important thing for us to realize, and one of the most important things that I like to talk about with intellectual property is that it doesn't need an age. You don't need to be 18 to own intellectual property. You can be 5 years old and painting and selling your paintings and making money at 5 years old. So it is one of the most, I think, empowering areas of development for people to see that they have potential inside of them that could lead to economic stability for themselves and their families.
Does that message resonate with them? Do they buy into that? Do they understand?
It's getting a little better, but we're not at the point where we are now. And I think a big part of that has to do with representation, because prior to maybe a Byron Messiah, we had people who were interested in music, but they didn't recognize that we could reach to the levels that Byron Messiah, for example, has gotten to. But I think we will have to understand sooner or later that this is what we have, because land is finite. Most of us don't have access to large amounts of cash or liquidity, so it's going to be important for us to really build on our own talents, especially with things like AI coming up, where AI could do a lot of things that some of us have been getting paid for, or so it's important for us to realize that we have these strengths within us, in our intellect, with our talent, our creativity, and it's just for us to understand how we can transform that into lucrative efforts.
So you use the term representation. At what level?
I think it's at any level, really. Understanding that these things can be successful. Understanding that you can leverage this intellectual property without having to look to the US or Europe for examples, but seeing Caribbean examples, seeing St. Kitts and Nevis people benefiting from their intellectual property. I think once we start seeing those success stories, the message is going to resonate a lot more.
How does the IPO SKN get that message out?
So we do public awareness initiatives where we organize, or people organize and invite us. We have a Facebook page where we post stories or little tidbits about intellectual property to help people recognize where intellectual property is. So I remember we had a story when Rihanna had performed for the Super Bowl, and that was shared nearly 75 times, and they had a lot of discussion on it, because then we were able to take a real life situation and explain how payment works and royalties work, and we got comments from all over the Caribbean, saying that you guys broke it down so well, so we understand that now. So it's trying to find those opportunities and making it more palatable for people to understand.
And so, talk to us about the level of engagement. Then, is your office contacted frequently? Is your staff kept busy? Are you out there generally on a regular basis?
Well, we used to be a lot more regular, but we have a number of things on our priority list right now that we're trying to deal with in office to ensure that we can accomplish some very major goals, hopefully in the next 12 to 18 months. So we are getting a lot more requests from persons either on the Facebook page or walk-ins into the office, or sometimes even you walking in the supermarket and somebody Miss Copyright, that's my name apparently. These sorts of random meetings and so on, we're seeing that a lot more as people get more comfortable, and also as these issues begin to arise internationally and regionally, people are trying to understand, like, what's happening here, why is this an issue?
And it's interesting that you mentioned that they call you Miss Copyright. That is actually what I stumbled over when I called you this night, right, and copyright. That's
yes,
exactly what happened.
I'm used to it. I'm used to it.
Okay. So as you speak about on the international level, tell us a bit about the World Intellectual Property Organization. Of course, you referenced it earlier.
Yes. So WIPO, World Intellectual Property Organization, it is an agency of the United Nations. So just like you have UNESCO and UNICEF, and they have very specific focus areas in, education or science and culture for UNESCO, WIPO deals with intellectual property matters for the United Nations. And as I mentioned, St. Kitts and Nevis is a member state, so we partner very closely with them. We meet with them annually, and we actually have to submit work plans and activities and areas where we would like their support. We have to report on those annually as well, or we have to make those requests annually and also report on the work that we've done.
And so what are some of the benefits that St. Kitts and Nevis would enjoy as being a part of this organization?
Well, we get fantastic support in terms of access to consultants. We have access to persons who do legislative reviews. We have access to musicians sometimes, sports people. We have access to professionals who are able to help us in our own work plans. So for example, maybe two to 3 years ago, we had an IP and sports session, and we were able to have presenters from Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago who were able to, talk to us more about licensing in sports and making money from sports using intellectual property and things of that nature. So through our membership with WIPO, we do receive quite a lot of support in that regard, technical support and training opportunities. We've also extended training opportunities to other departments in government to make sure that people also understand how IP impacts their work. So they have been an excellent partner to us for since 1996, I think, or 95.
And I would imagine it's also helpful in getting best practices. You mentioned that
of course,
the copyright
yes.
law, the time period is going to be extended. It's basically based on what's happening out there, getting our legislation or policies up to date with what exists internationally.
Yes, what exists internationally and also what we've agreed to in other treaties as well. So they really assist us with these practical ways of developing, because I should tell you that the staff of the Intellectual Property Office is 6 people. So it is quite a large, list of tasks that fall under the Intellectual Property Office. And so when we're able to delegate some of that or have them assist us in that way, it is tremendously helpful.
That doesn't sound like 6 is enough.
Oh, well, is there a government department that has all the staff that they need? I don't think so.
All right, so April 26th, of course, it's the 1st of May right now for those who are watching and listening live. But April 26th was commemorated annually as World Intellectual Property Day.
Yes.
Tell us a bit about the significance of this day.
So every year, the World Intellectual Property Organization picks a theme. And the work program for them includes a lot of activities and opportunities for training and events surrounding whatever theme that they select. So this year's theme was IP and the Sustainable Development Goals, building our common future with innovation and creativity. And so the focus this year is going to be on, you know, celebrating those persons who are using their innovation and creativity to enhance our common experience and our common future by focusing their efforts to, you know, the targets of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals.
Innovation, of course, is basically building on, well, it could be your property or building on something else that's already out there. Where does that fall within the IP spectrum?
Well, strictly speaking, once you, of course, if you have copied something someone has done, if you've made A and I make A, I've copied what you've done. But if you made A and I make A plus a small c, then I also have a new product. So my product would be able to get its own protection, provided that I have not copied yours in a way that is infringing.
Okay. And so you mentioned, of course, that they were the theme for it, and any activities that were held locally or is planned?
Well, this is the first we've had. Of course, the InFocus interview, but throughout like I said, it's a celebration for a year that starts on April 26th. So throughout the year, we want to focus some of those persons in St. Kitts and Nevis whose activities are promoting the Sustainable Development Goals in an innovative or creative way. So that's one of the things that we would like to do this year. A bit low-key, but as I said, it's mainly because we are heavily focused on other priority areas for the office this year. Okay,
so none of the avenues that you'd care to discuss at this time in terms of the engagement that you will have with persons, whether it be meetings, workshops, conferences, town halls?
It's still, I mean, we have a year. We have a year, but for now, I know that there are people locally who are doing fantastic things that could be considered, you know, helping the SDGs, the advancement of the SDGs. So, you know, giving them that highlight and bringing them to other people's attention in the hope that they also support them. And, you know, also encouraging people to start their own initiatives that help to advance the SDGs as well.
Okay. Ms. Williams, Mrs. Williams, I'm so accustomed to call you Ms. Williams. As you speak about the SDG, now, of course, St. Kitts and Nevis is being transitioned into a sustainable island state. That is the goal of the government here. And one of those pillars is the orange economy, as I would have established in the beginning. Now, how do you see this unfolding, especially given the theme that you just mentioned in terms of IP and the SDGs? How do you see this unfolding?
No, it's important for us it goes back to what I was saying earlier about recognizing that we have talent, creativity, innovation in us already, and recognizing that on those elements we can build futures for ourselves, our communities, our countries. So it's important for us then to pay attention to how you can utilize those things using the intellectual property system to advance yourself. So if you're into music, it's going to be important for you to understand copyright and the business side of the entertainment industry, so that you could understand things like publishing and royalties and performances and split sheets and all these different things that come up, because this is the basis on which you're going to get paid. It's not just going to the studio, doing a song and putting it up on YouTube. That's not enough. So if we recognize then that there is a framework in place that can help us to benefit, it really is important for us to understand that framework and understand where we fall and what we have to do to make sure that we can benefit. And as I said before, the important thing are the very, as people say, I don't even know if they say it anymore, the cool thing to recognize from intellectual property is that you just need you to start. At least there's no property, you don't need the property, you don't need these things, and this is the basis on which the orange economy is based. This is the creativity, this is the innovation, this is the songwriting, this is the fashion design, things that you just visualize in your head and you make it and then somebody buys it. But understanding how the system works so that you can benefit from it and not just give it away, not just as a hobby, not just as something that people disrespect, but understanding that if we build a strong orange economy, built on innovation, creativity, enterprise, and helping people understand business, that this is going to be the way up for a lot of people in St. Kitts and Nevis who perhaps may not have access to other property.
And so how do you see basic policies or projects even that would help to leverage this type of opportunity that is available under the orange economy?
What do you mean, how do I see it?
Well, for instance, as you mentioned, I know there was I think you participated in I think there was a television forum or an online forum in terms of the Ministry of Creative Economy, where you would have been present and you would have spoken a lot to the type of opportunities there are for persons to take advantage of. But unfortunately, there are some persons who may feel that they're not in the position yet where they're not confident enough to take advantage of the opportunity, or maybe they don't fully understand it. And so it's a matter of leveraging the opportunities out there. For instance, I am aware that the Ministry of Small Business Development, of course, there's a small loan program, but the important thing for persons to benefit from that is that they have to register.
Right. So understanding, we have to have these kind of policies where we invite people in, where we make a conscious effort to make the entries or admission requirements as simple as possible, understanding the different nuances of small and medium enterprise development in St. Kitts and Nevis. We have to develop these kind of policies where people understand and take advantage of the opportunities, because without that, it's just going to be a lot of the same, where again, we all probably know somebody who's extremely talented, but why aren't they making money? So helping people to format their businesses in such a way that, something as simple as a price list. What is the price for your goods? There are people who just kind of, give me $60 for that. But we have to help people structure their businesses and their initiatives in the way that allows them to benefit financially from it.
I was at one of the town hall meetings for the budget consultation, and you would be surprised how many persons balked at the idea that they have to register as creatives.
Yeah, it is. I don't know. I guess maybe we're used to being spoon-fed, and people think you should just say you want something and it comes to you. But unfortunately, things have to be done in a way that there's accountability and there's a way to monitor and track progress. So we're going to have to do things like register. We're going to have to bear the discomfort of filling in a form and things of that nature if we really are interested in moving forward as professionals. Because imagine going to the US or the UK and somewhere, and somebody tells you have to fill out a form, and you don't want to fill out a form to go on a show. Like, no, we wouldn't do that. So we have to take our business seriously and recognize that it is going to be led by the amount of effort that we put in as creative people and not what people pour into us solely.
Right, and as we speak about copyright, I'd have to quote, but give the quote attributed to the person, which would be Pastor Lincoln Connor in this case. He mentioned that one of the differences between persons who are successful and who are not successful is the will.
The will?
The will.
I would also say the work. It's the will and the work, because you could really want something and you're not quite sure exactly how to get there, but you ask questions, you make yourself available to be helped, you follow guidance, and you take a chance on yourself. So it really is requiring exactly that, the will, but it requires a lot of work. Once
you have the will, you put will to put in the work too. If you intend to be the best sprinter, you'll wake up 5 o'clock in the morning to go out to put in that work.
That's true, that's true.
Right. Okay, so the engagement that your office has with the Ministry of Creative Economy and Sports, it seems like it's a very close relationship.
Yes, we do work very well together, and we have had a number of projects in recent times together. So, and this year, one of the projects that we're working on is an IP and sports project. So we're going to be working with sports groups and organizations, helping them to see the value of intellectual property, hopefully getting, maybe some groups to organize their logos so that they can, go into merchandising and licensing their intellectual property and things of that nature.
Why is sports considered intellectual property?
So sports is not considered intellectual property, but there are elements of intellectual property in sports.
Such as?
Team names, team logos. So for example, Arsenal, I don't know if I'm offending anybody, but that's just the first one that comes to my head. Arsenal has a logo, and only the owners of that Arsenal logo will be authorized to print T-shirts, and they would either print it or they would authorize other people to print it. So if you now buy an Arsenal shirt or jersey that is not an authentic Arsenal jersey, then this is where things like the price difference comes in. You want an official Arsenal jersey, so you have to go to the official Arsenal distributors and things of that nature. So programming, we see sometimes that you don't have access to see the Super Bowl or I remember wrestling was a thing. I don't know, is wrestling still a thing?
Absolutely. Roman Reigns.
Yes, okay. So, our ability to see these things like football and things of that nature, because the broadcasting rights to see these games usually belongs to somebody, and then other people have to pay to have access to show it on their programming. So this is how there's intellectual property in sports, and helping our people here in St. Kitts and Nevis to recognize how it plays into that arena.
Because there are times, of course, when on a Sunday, and as you mentioned, the NFL, that you would like to see the major game or see your favorite team play, but it's not what's on the channel. It's because the channel that we have does not have the right to broadcast that game. Unless it's a national game, then everyone has access to it.
Right.
But then if on your team, or the team is playing in the local market where you're getting the feed from, then the responsibility of the station is to show the local team as well.
All of that is intellectual property. Yeah, because the programming, somebody has recording rights. So somebody has the right to record the game, and somebody has the right to broadcast the game. And people who want those rights have to pay for them based on copyright.
Okay, we're almost out of time for this program, but I can't leave without having a conversation on artificial intelligence.
Yes, it's a big one.
Let's talk a bit about that in terms of persons who a AI tools to generate content, because I'll give you a practical example, and it's a simple one. A friend of mine was telling me that his son was asked to write a letter of apology, and he went to ChatGPT.
Yeah. So AI is definitely changing the game for a lot of people. You just go to ChatGPT and say, write me this, and it comes out, it spits something back out. But when it comes to the legal frameworks, a lot of countries are making the steps to ban protection for works created solely by AI. So, for example, that letter of apology would not be able to be copyright protected. So, but that is a legislative or common law position that each country would have to make. But that has definitely been the subject of case law in the UK and the US, for example. And even us, as we consider our own copyright legislation, there is a provision included that says if it is not created by a human, it cannot qualify for copyright protection. So that would mean, for example, let's say you go to ChatGPT and you tell ChatGPT, write you song lyrics about whatever. Normally speaking, if you wrote those song lyrics, you would be able to qualify to get royalty payments. But because that was created by AI, you wouldn't be able to do that.
But how would you know if it's created by AI?
Well, this is the thing. Of course, this is you asked one of the big issues there, because it comes down to an honor system where people are going to have to say, I used it and I don't deserve it. But you know, most people may not be honest or be willing to be honest about that.
And then the other question is that if you use it, but you just borrow from it, you don't use it line for line, I mean, and you put in your own thoughts and your own words, again, where does that fall?
But then it's solely created by a human. So if you get inspiration, or you get like an outline, and then you fill it in and you change and you cut and paste and shift around, then it would be able to be copyright protected from that.
I know there's a case where I think it was in South Korea where the top of the charts was being dominated by an AI. That persons were actually listening more so, downloading. I imagine they have to pay for these songs. I don't even know.
Yes, you do.
Yes,
you do.
But it's created by AI.
Right.
And it's a virtual character that is performing these songs.
Right, but well, I don't know what the South Korean position is on AI, but that's one of the things that we're concerned about, even as people in the creative industries, because there was a whole song that was created by AI using Drake's voice, and it sounded exactly like Drake, because of course whoever was feeding the AI tool fed it a lot of Drake material, so then it was able to produce something that sounded exactly like Drake, but Drake had no knowledge or had given any authority for that song. So then how do we deal with things like that? I mean, these are no issues that we're discussing, and we do have an AI and IP project that we're going to be working on later this year as well, for us to explore these kind of issues, because it's blowing up so fast, and from an IP perspective it's a bit shattering, because where do we go? And you ask like a serious question, how will we know that AI was involved? And there have been a number of legal cases brought of people who are upset that their work has been inputted into things like ChatGPT without their permission. So it's a lot of issues, but we are definitely keeping our eyes on that.
And also image creation. I would have seen some of them online at times in terms of an AI I can't even call it imagination, but an AI rendering of things related to St. Kitts and Nevis, and persons would have said that they are appealing visually and striking, but can you put that on a canvas and sell it?
Well, it wouldn't be. I mean, you can, but if you disclose that it is AI protected, it was AI created, then you wouldn't be able to benefit from it. I mean, and the other issue, and you talked about rendering, where I thought you were going to go, we have to also be aware of the criminal aspect of it, where people are using AI to make it appear that Ian is saying something, and it's not you, it's AI saying something, but they've used your image or things of that nature. So we do have to be aware of how it impacts us, our safety and security as well.
Yeah, I actually was going to go there as well. So,
yeah.
Especially as you mentioned in terms of producing a voice note, that would be copyright because it came from yourself. But if it's created by an AI, that's another different story.
And you're hearing all these cases as well of people using AI to call people's family members and tell them, I'm stranded somewhere, send me money. And maybe it's your grandmother, and your grandmother knows your voice and it sounds just like you, so she goes and sends money. So we have to be mindful of how AI is going to impact us for the good and also for the bad.
All right, so Mrs. Knight, final question for you in terms of bringing it back here to St. Kitts and Nevis again. What are some of the areas that nationals and residents have shown the most interest in?
Well, definitely music. That is an area that we have had a lot of interest in. People want to understand what they have to do to make their work, to benefit from their work. We have also had a lot of interest recently about small business names, because this is an area that keeps coming up where people want to trademark their names, but then because of different elements in the name, it can't qualify for a trademark, or it requires additional steps for it to be trademarked. And then they get frustrated because, oh gosh, do I have to go rebrand my whole business? Why didn't anybody tell me this before? And things of that nature. So I realized recently business names seems to be a lot of interest. People are interested in trademarking their goods and services, or their trademarks. And so we're getting a lot more interest in that area locally.
So music, you mentioned business names. What about craft vendors?
Craft vendors, we haven't had a lot of interest expressed, at least, but we are working on legislation to protect industrial designs. So that is another area of intellectual property, but that now relates to the aesthetic of a design. So the phone, the tablet, the shape of it, rather than the function of it. So if you create, like, there's a example we always use in our presentations of somebody who did a juicer, like a lemon juicer, and it looks like a spider on legs. So if you create a juicer but it has a specific or unique aesthetic appearance, then you could get that appearance protected as well, which is where most of our craft work would fall. So we're getting legislation to allow that protection as well.
And earlier you mentioned that, of course, the copyright bill is it's in Parliament, it's up for review.
Yes.
Tell us a bit briefly about that.
So we have copyright legislation since 2002. Well, it's been in effect since 2002. However, there have been so many developments since 2002 that, it's time for us to update it. But in updating it, we realized we have to scrap so many things, so we just started fresh. So instead of an amendment bill, it is an actual new copyright bill that is going to go to Parliament. So we're including things like the AI, we're extending the protection. We have new regulations for collective management organizations like ECHO. That has been something in the air as well. So we now have regulations to govern the way that they operate in St. Kitts and Nevis. A host of other things that we're hoping to update the legislation on.
Right. And the good thing about it is that legislation is always posted once it's introduced in Parliament.
Yes, and we have been getting comments all from Dominica on the copyright bill. So it's been interesting to see the interest.
Persons willing to learn more about IPO, SKN, and how they can protect themselves, whether it be copyright or through trademarks, patents, etc., how can they do so?
Well, Google is usually a very good help, but we have to be mindful that you might see something that is not necessarily relevant to St. Kitts and Nevis. So if you just want general information, you could just Google. But if you want specific information on St. Kitts and Nevis, you can go to our website, www.ipo.gov. infocusintellectualproperty.kn, or you could follow our Facebook page, Intellectual Property Office of St. Kitts and Nevis. Or you could come to our office and just have a conversation. We are located in the old CNC supermarket building that is opposite the Lee Llewellyn Judicial Complex.
Jihan Williams Knight, a very fascinating conversation. I'm glad that you made some time to come on InFocus and help to speak to a lot of these issues. It's very complicated. Of course, I got to delve into the Apple-Samsung issue, but you know.
We'd be here for days. We'd be here for days.
Right, but we just have 1 hour for this program. So certainly we would love to have you back as time goes by and you begin to roll out the new policies so get persons to become more aware of what the implications are for them. So thank you very much for coming.
Thank you so much for having me as well.
And we'd like to thank you, viewers and listeners, for joining us for this edition of InFocus. We trust that you will join us next week at the same place, at the same time, for another edition. I'm Ian Richards.
Join us every Wednesday for InFocus, a weekly talk show produced by the St. Kitts Nevis Information Service, where we provide exclusives with key persons within the government and discuss pertinent, relevant and interesting matters that affect us all. Tune in every Wednesday, live on ZIZ Radio and streamed live on Facebook at SKNIS Media and ZIZ Online. InFocus, your government, your business.